So joining me now is Erin Haynes, MSNBC political contributor and editor-at-large for The 19th. Very apropos for today. Lynn Nguyen, executive director at Run AAPI, and Carmen Perez-Jordan, civil rights leader and Chicana feminist. So happy to have you ladies here. Erin, you're at The 19th, so I think I have to kick this off with you. As we talked about, this is the 103 years since Congress passed the 19th Amendment. But what would you say is the biggest challenge facing women today?
Yeah, thank you, Tiffany, first of all, for airing that fuller history of the 19th Amendment, which is still unfinished work in our democracy, in our society, as you so clearly laid out. Look, 103 years after the passage of the 19th Amendment in the Senate, the challenge and then, frankly, the threat is the white men who have had a monopoly on our society, our democracy, and our country, who continue to block our access to the ballot and our liberty as citizens, as women, and everything that comes with it, right? These are the same freedoms that they have always enjoyed and didn't need to earn through amendments. And while it's fine for people to share something when you don't think it's going to cost you anything, when people feel like they are losing something that belongs to them, particularly power, everybody else watch out. I mean, women are the majority of the population today, the majority of the electorate, and yet minority rule is still keeping a playing field uneven across this country. And that is leaving women, the women that I talk to, the voters that I talk to, feeling less free and less fair. We know that women vote, but they are fighting for a better workplace on the other side of a pandemic. They're still protesting gun violence that is killing their children, killing their parents and grandparents. They're searching desperately for baby formula. They're fighting to keep reproductive access that gives them the ability to make decisions about their own health and bodies. Still pushing for equal pay. As you pointed out, still do not have equal representation politically in this country. We're half the population, again, half the democracy, yet there are only 24 of us in the Senate and no black women, 9 women governors, which is a record. You know, we have a record number of women in Congress, but that's still only 27%. So, I mean, obviously, yes, the suffrage movement, took up so much of the last century. But what we know that the right to vote for women and really just our access as equal participants and citizens in this country is still very fragile and something that women must remain vigilant about.
I completely agree, Erin. That was a really good cap of what all the things that women are facing. Lynn, all the things that Erin talked about are impacted, their policy that disproportionately impact women. And as we know, many of these trash policies are coming from state legislatures where women still remain underrepresented. Women are just as unlikely today as 20 years ago to express interest in running for office. People tend to prioritize men as being more electable. Nevada, I believe, is the only state where a majority of women are represented in the state legislature there. And when women are in office, they focus on things that impact everybody and it has a positive impact on everybody. How do we change this balance? I mean, if we are the majority of this country, how do we make sure that we are reflected at every level of government when it comes to deciding policy?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question, Tiffany. And Erin, you summarized it so beautifully in naming what this is. But I mean, I'm here in Texas. Okay, I'm here. Houston is my home. It is just so complex. And every time we see this such extreme assault on our rights, on our own women's rights, we have to stop telling people you just need to go vote. It is so much more complex than that. And the opportunity to run for office, trying to do this in states where, one, we have such extreme restrictive laws, voter suppression laws, you're gerrymandered in districts where there's a literal dilution of our power, of our voice. It's just so complex. It is. And I mean, I hear this a lot, Tiffany, run for office, but and specifically for women of color, where your time, your resources, it just looks radically different for us, for Black women, for Latina, for Asian women. It is a very different existence for us. Access of resources will be everything. It will be. And I think we are seeing a shift in that, specifically in this year for midterms. But the level of support just isn't there. And respect. I have to say that, too. The level of respect and support, it's not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing that play out in real time. And, you know, look, we do have to call out our sisters in this struggle who don't always vote in alignment with the folks you see on the screen here. That is very frustrating. Carmen, we saw a lot of this. I mean, when we think about this is when Congress passed the 19th Amendment, but when we go back and look at what was happening around that time, there were people like Elizabeth Stanton and other women who were really focused on white women and thought white women were the priority. Never mind what black men are going through, never mind what people of color were going through, and actually said that out loud. It was, of course, Sojourner Truth who gave the famous speech, Ain't I a Woman, at the convention where they're discussing the 19th. I want to ask you, Carmen, I feel like there's still a divide today in the conversations that we have about women's rights, with some of white women continuously voting overwhelmingly Republican. Lucy Caldwell's a show regular, and she gave one of the best and most honest answers, I thought, on why that happens. I want you to take a listen, Carmen, and then I'll ask you about it on the other side.
A real problem is that Republican women are in this mode, and specifically white women, where in a way they do benefit from the patriarchy, right? And so they are feeling or participating in the same kind of story of economic insecurity, or, a right or a privilege that they believe their white husbands and sons and fathers deserve is going to a person of color, right? So they have a stake in the old paradigm that is harmful. They also, at the same time, it's good to be a white woman, because white women also benefit from the progress that Democrats have worked to assure for white women.
Carmen, I loved the honesty in that answer, because when she said it's good to be a white woman, we are not impacted in the same way as other people. You dealt with a little bit of this in the Women's March. Talk to me about where we are today. Are we more unified today than we were 103 years ago, or do those same divides, do they still exist?
Well, I think we have to understand that patriarchy isn't upheld only by men. Not one of the 8 women who are Republican members of Congress voted for the Women's Health Protection Act. And meanwhile, there are male allies. We need to be in solidarity. We know the historical context of women having access to privilege through their husbands, sons, fathers. Women of color have always fought alongside our men, always have fought and shown up for our children, our fathers. But it's very clear that we need to begin to feminize politics. Not only do we need to protect the right to vote, but we need to look at every single level, whether it's humanizing the experience of women going and getting formula. All this stuff needs to be feminized. And we do have a long way to go. And it's the reason why we have to make sure that women of color, and I know it was said, not only do we need to show up to vote, but we need to also be encouraged to vote. We need to be well informed, but we're the ones that we could trust.
Yeah. And, Aaron, I think so many people are despondent nowadays. The weight of the world is on everybody. You turn on the TV and see, imagery that is just heartbreaking. I just wonder, because women are typically the people on the front lines fighting for democracy, I wonder, has the inspiration, has the fight, has the enthusiasm been dampened or empowered?
Women have always been on the front lines for the fight for democracy, Tiffany, and that remains true today. But much as in the way that Carmen said, last year on the anniversary of suffrage, I wrote about the reality that, when women of color prioritize their gender over their party, they have worked to make this democracy more free and more fair for everybody. And frankly, when white women choose gender over party, it often makes this country less free and less fair for everybody. And we know that white women have voted, have not voted in the majority as Democrats in in a couple of generations. And that is having an impact on particularly, what women's freedom is going to mean in this country, but also just the reality that after 1920, when the 19th Amendment was ratified and largely improved ballot access for white women, they stopped really fighting for that right for all women, right? As Black women, Latinas, Native American women, Asian American women, as you mentioned in the beginning, continue to have to push for their access to the ballot and have had to continue maintain access to the ballot ever since. And so the fight for suffrage absolutely continues. It's a question of who's in this fight and whether white women are now going to stand shoulder to shoulder with the women of color whose access to the ballot is now absolutely in peril and who are absolutely feeling like they are having to get back on the front lines to defend their access to the ballot in a way that white women have not had to in more than a century.
Yeah. In their lifetimes. I think that's the difference, Lynn. We remember, like I remember hearing stories from my family about what it was like. I know, testimony of my family growing up in the Jim Crow South. And so there is that divide. When you have not been adversely impacted the same way, there's a level of indifference. Your take on that divide?
Yeah, and I mean, I do want to say this in the perspective as an Asian American woman. I mean, even today, the rise in anti-Asian violence, shootings that we have seen specifically targeting us, whether it's at hair salons, it's our massage parlors, it's our spas, all targeting us. I mean, for a lot of Asian women, we're still fighting to be seen. We're still trying to experience this real visibility as Asian Americans and to prove that, like, yes, we belong here in this country, all the while still living in fear. I mean, that is our binary reality that a lot of us haven't chosen to live in, but that's where we are in 2022. And so this fight for solidarity and like Aaron and Carmen mentioned it so well, it's just this, we need to see white women stepping up for us as much as have always been on the front lines.